But there's a couple of things I kind of wanted to touch upon today regarding the music video, the whole lore, Mr. Insanity, Maito, and kind of where it all comes from, and what exactly we're in for in the next few years, for as long as I'm doing this. Honestly, I don't know when I'm gonna quit, but yeah, let me tell you. Let me just start from the very beginning. Are you guys ready? I know it seems quite formal, which it's not very like me, but let me just tell you where, for those that don't know, let me just tell you where this whole lore and these characters really come from. Okay, so for many of you that may know, and some of you that may not, I do have bipolar type 1. And for those who don't know what bipolar is, it's a condition that for some, they say everyone has a bit of bipolar in them, which is you experience your ups and lows. However, those who have bipolar, they have a more radical chance of experiencing a higher high and a lower low in a short amount of time, or it could go for ages. And it's not directly affected by anything. That's the thing. It's kind of affected in your brain chemical, like it kind of switches. I don't know exactly how it works, because for me, it's like it's always been a feeling I get, and then it just, one day you could be completely fine and everything could be aligned and you could feel like everything makes sense. And then all of a sudden, you are propelled into the most darkest, deepest corner of the earth where you can't seem to recognize yourself. And the reason why I bring this this disorder up, for example, is because it has somewhat of a direct correlation in relation to another disorder, which I've never really kind of mentioned, but sometimes people forget it. Well, they don't forget it. They don't know that sometimes this disorder and this disorder goes hand in hand. And, you know, also me, like I've just kind of recently come to terms, and not come to terms, but more rather like I've kind of went searching and studied a little bit more on it. But they usually go hand in hand with another disorder called DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. That, in a brief term, means you disassociate yourself with who you are. So meaning you have more than 2 personalities, at most. So why would people do that? Why would you want to disassociate yourself? I don't think it's more of a want. It really does come from trauma. You know, whether I think the majority is trauma in childhood. And the reason why I bring this up is because people that have bipolar and that are dismissed in a more, I'll say, not welcoming environment, I guess a more, well, I mean, how can you have the best environment, right? You know, everyone goes through some crazy shit. But I'm just saying this because someone that has severe ups and downs tend to then disassociate themselves with their extreme highs and extreme lows. So imagine if like you're this person that, 1 minute you're this person that sees everything aligned and you're so confident and you have so many ideas and everything just seems to align for you and you feel like you're wearing just the best thing in the world, right? And then the next minute you feel like you just want to go jump off a bridge because it's such a contrast. And I'm just saying this because it is an emotion and it is a thought that a lot of people might have during this disorder. You can't really explain it. It's very hard to explain. But saying this, it's like looking at yourself in the mirror then constantly. You tend to forget who you are at a certain point in time. Especially if you're in your manic state and you go through a certain trauma. People that also do have bipolar then tend to get it mixed up. So they disassociate themselves because they don't want to be a version of themselves that have to deal with certain trauma, right? I'm just putting it out there. I'll leave this on my Instagram page and whatnot. So that's kind of where I'll lay this out as a background. So it's something that people deal with. It's a real thing. And you might ask, what's the closest reference for like DID and such and such and such? Well, conceptually, I think films have already tried doing it. Things like Split, I think it's Split. Maybe was it called Split? Oh, yes, something like that. We have someone at 31 identities. I mean, that's kind of more an emphasis, not an emphasis. Sorry, that's more exaggerated. Obviously, because it's a movie, you know, and that's what I'm doing right now too. But so putting that out there, what does this have to do with all my concepts? So I started this journey, this music video, no, sorry, not music, but music as an artist about 2 years ago now, two and a half. I mean, I don't even fucking know. So it's about 2.5 years. So it's been a while, and I decided the minute I start making music or being an artist, I kind of needed it to be something very personal. So something that I could very well relate to, and something that I could kind of do the utmost for other people in the world. And I knew it was a dangerous route that I was probably venturing into, but regardless, it was kind of inevitable because I kind of made up my mind. So for me, the reason why I really wanted to, again, bring this up was the idea of becoming an artist and basing it on your disorders could be somewhat a dangerous thing. And I'm putting a whole disclaimer out there because how much you put out into the world and such, it's like you give it. So for example, like if you give your disorder a name, you know, a name of any sort, you are putting yourself at risk of giving that disorder more power. You know, they say ignorance is bliss, and for the most part, yes, but people still go through shit like that on a day-to-day, regardless if you can and can't help them. And a lot of times people mistake that for, or like, oh sorry, it puts a lot of people into, I guess the people around you, they kind of suffer the most, but they will never understand to a certain extent how much you go through. And just keep in mind that's kind of, it's unfair to a certain extent, but it is something that, but you will always have supportive people that support you regardless, right? So now, the minute I started naming my lows and my highs, because ever since I was a kid, I think I was very fortunate enough to be very exposed to imagination, right? So I've always had a very extreme high and extreme low ever since I could remember, actually. So I think DID really does start at an early age, but if you go through a certain trauma, you tend to block out your experiences. Hence you disassociate yourself with the version you are when you go through something extremely traumatic, and you tend to forget. Well, you block that part out, right? So I've been doing that my whole life, pretty much. And obviously bipolar doesn't really help with that because you do get it mixed up. So the characters that I developed, so who is Maito? Let's go start from number one, Maito. This is the amazing fan gift that I got from Mexico, from one of the dreamers. Love it very much. Well, Maito does. And I love it too, but Maito loves it more. You know, always takes it around. It's like a lucky charm or something. Sayang. Sayang. So, as I was saying, what was I saying? Oh yes. So, who is Maito then? So Maito, I did start off with the character Maito, right? Maito stands for mood swings in disorder. And he's a character that is based on my alter ego that takes a lot of the trauma and a lot of the dark and crazy shit that I go through in life, and he becomes the personification of those emotions and experiences, right? So sometimes when, let's say, okay then, so what about your highs then? Okay, what about your moments that you're high? Because what must go up must come down, and vice versa. I don't know if that works. It doesn't work in a scientific sense, but that, I mean, coming back up it's kind of like big hill. Just think of it like that. You roll a big ball down an extremely steep hill, and it goes up, and it's so crisp up, and it goes back down again. So that's kind of the radical emotions that I go through on a day to day. I've been dealing with it for about as long as I can remember, and I still am not used to it. It's kind of like someone cutting off your arm, and then your arm grows back off, and they come again and they have to cut it off. So every single time they cut it off, you never get used to the pain, right? You get used to the idea. You don't get used to the pain. So that is number one. You'll never get used to the pain. No one will ever get used to going down. And I'll equally say, you won't also get used to going extremely up. I kind of personally think, and this is personally, I think your highs, your extreme highs, are more dangerous, in fact, than your extreme lows. And the reason being is when you're in your extreme highs, you tend to really start pushing yourself to the limit. So me, personally, that's when you get all these crazy ideas. You get all this. You think everything's aligning, and because everything's aligning for you, you feel like you have the need to do something about it. Otherwise, you will not go to sleep. You can't sleep, and you will seek out any, I think, professional therapy help and yada yada yada. But that too, my friend, is 한국 아니에요. That too, my friend, is also dosed with, I guess, prescribed medication. And I've been on prescribed medication, and for the most part, as a creative, I'm sure any creative could tell you this, but it does numb a lot of who you are or who you think you are. So it's all about balancing, and I do have a lot of amazing friends to help guideline me through this, and it's always been such an amazing journey with that. You have to always stay healthy. I think that's the biggest thing. But the business that I'm in, you tend to go on the fast life. So it's inherently exposing a lot of stimulus into my disorders. And if I go to any therapist, they will say, that's not the exactly best ideal job for somebody that goes through certain experiences such as such. But I'm here to kind of show people that you can deal with it, but also you also got to know when to stop. I haven't learned when to stop yet, but I've learned to counterbalance and balance out living with certain disorders and making that into art. So now I come back to this whole point. So what does this have to do with Maito and my whole discography and my whole concept? So I based my whole album and my whole artist concept on my disorders. And some people might be like, is that a quite a safe thing to do? And in the beginning I thought obviously not, and it still might not be, but I'm at a good point in my life where I think it's doing more good than harm. So such and such, Maito is the character that I disassociate myself with, because it's just the person that I feel like I turn into when I'm in my extreme dips. And it's not, and the feeling I have when I get into my extreme dips isn't exactly like, you do have symptoms of depression and certain ideas, like really wacky ass ideas, and you just don't feel like doing anything because everything looks like it's black and white. Hence why when Maito comes out, everything is black and white. But for me, this character is a product of my trauma, but he's the only character and the only persona and demeanor that in my mind that I created ever since I can remember knows how to deal with such darkness, right? So me, just Ian, Christian, whoever you want to call me, it's like a very hard thing for me to switch on and off, because I've been going radically down and up my whole life, and I've unnoticedly have been switching on and off every time something critical happens to me. And the reason why it's so critical when people go, oh, then, you know, can't you just flick it off your shoulder? It's a little different, because imagine you are in an extremely high state of your mind, a state where not many average people can feel, and you are just trooping on like you're God or something, and it's like you have all these crazy ideas, but your body is shutting down on you. So that's when I start hallucinating a lot, and that's kind of when your brain is really on high extreme power. So it's just pumping and pumping, but you can't sleep. And that's when you start really going crazy. Like that's when you start going insane. Hence, I bring to you the character, Mr. Insanity. And that is kind of my higher state. The only difference between, I think, when I'm in my manic highs and as to when I'm in my manic lows is I tend to black out during that transitional time. So I do have memory loss. Just to give you a good example, you know, fuck it, I'll just tell you all. You know, during certain moments in tour, just because of how much stimulus I was getting from everything, I blacked out almost a quarter of the times near to the end. And it was a scary feeling because I didn't think how, like, I've always had certain blackouts, but I've always kind of locked myself indoors, which is why I never go out. And because it does grow a certain fear in you, because imagine you black out for like a couple of days or maybe like a week or two, and you wake up and you think the last thing you remember was yesterday, but in fact it was a week ago or something, and you realize you've had conversations and you've done certain things, and it's kind of like, okay, the most closest thing I can give you like a reference to is it feels like a dream, right? It feels like a dream. So sometimes you would close your eyes and you'd wake up and you'd be at a certain place and there'll be people in front of you, and you don't know exactly how you got there. But it's funny because when your brain functions in these disassociating parts of your compartment, you do remember what series of events happened when you are in that character. So, for example, like Maito has a more biblical understanding of religion, and he's prone to talk in a different way. Sounds very deep. By the way, the voice changing, yes, that's an actual thing for Maito, and he hits an octave which I can't. So there's things that your brain tends to remember or tends to tap into when you disassociate yourself and you change it to somebody else. And honestly, those moments are probably the times that I've always struggled with, because it was something that I couldn't tell my friends. It was something that I couldn't, even if I tried so many times. Don't get me wrong. I think ever since I was in my mid-20s, I've tried to fix it. Which, by the way, it's you're not here to get fixed. That's the number one thing. You're here to learn to coexist and kind of understand yourself better, and learn to know that the imperfections are the perfections about yourself. So if you're here to really try fixing it and you think you're going to get rid of it, then I advise you that is not the way that I think personally you should approach it, because then you're going to tend to isolate yourself, and it is going to grow that disorder more and more and more as you grow. So it's something that everyone has to get through, and especially with a certain I think experiences really matter. You can go to the best therapist and such, get the best medication for you, but I think learning to live with it through experience gets you through a lot of hurdles with understanding this disorder, such as myself. I'm still learning and I'm still trying to process if any of this is real. And the reason why I didn't really come up with this in the beginning was, to be completely honest, was because it was embarrassing. Like, just to be completely honest, it was, it was not something that I was extremely proud of, and it wasn't something that I'd liked for people to see me in the light for. And it's, society tends to have a certain taboo against mental disorders and bringing that to the spotlight. So I knew I didn't want to project any type of failure in my journey to becoming an artist. But what could I do? Like I'm going through so many ups and downs, and I black out every single time I go through certain moments. When I speak to some of my friends, they eventually get really, I guess, annoyed at a certain point, because they realize it's like they don't know who they're talking to. So you have to also understand, you got to compart that into understanding that some people will never understand what you truly experience. How do we ever truly understand what everyone truly goes through? We don't. We really don't. So you got to stop making assumptions. I think that's number one, because everyone does go through something serious at the end of the day. Not just people with disorders, just everyone in general. So you can't assume you understand or you will know what that person is going through. So anyway, so such and such, yes, yada, yada, yada. So I've been living with this. I've been blacking out here and there. A good point that I've always brought up was, what would my blackouts look like, right? Have I ever... So I think starting from a couple of years ago, I started allowing my team to record a lot of these blackouts. And the reason why I never recorded it when I was in my early 20s was because I was trying to understand it and I didn't really believe it myself. So coming to terms and coming to understand it it's one thing, it's hard. And number two, I tend to kind of forget if it's the bipolar disorder that I'm dealing with, or if it's the DID that is kicking in. Again, it goes hand in hand, because when you're in your bipolar manic phase, if you get to the extremities and you've had a traumatic moment, you will tend to think you are somebody else, like a superhero thing, and then when you come back down, you'll have such a big comparison to who you were, let's say the other day, as to who you are now, that you will not believe that this is you, that was you. And for the most part, some of you might be like, I want to be that character, but when you come down to who you are, which is I always say the balance of the persona, the person that really has the mic, the one that keeps the foundation, and that is the core you. Remember, it really is, you do have a core you. You are who you are. Despite how many personalities you disassociate yourself with, you still are who you are. It doesn't mean you are completely lost. Meaning, a lot of times, I think I've realized people with DID, they go down this rabbit hole with never coming to terms with really finding an identity that is wholly who they are. So you all know who I am, right? You all know things that I love and things that I don't like. But that can change for different personas. And it's an interesting idea. I know it's still not very classifiable, I would say. I think especially even in the psychiatry scene, and I think it's a very hard thing to identify, because some people might identify with something else, or they might overlook it with something else. And that's completely fine, I'm just here to say it's completely fine. So going back to this, reeling it all back in, the whole general based concept of my artistry is based on my DIDs and bipolar. Maito is the force that is my so-called guardian. I call it a guardian because he's the one that really had to put up with a lot of the most traumatic moments I've had through my life experiences. How bad could it have been? It was pretty bad, I'll tell you that. Because I just didn't know how to deal with that. So I brought that character Maito, and at the time, mind you, it wasn't called Maito. He didn't have a name. He was just a character that I thought I turned into, that knew how to take a lot of shit. And what's funny, it was, I've mentioned this in the Maito first album, the Memories in Disorder documentary, but I've always felt like I was living with somebody else. Multiple, I guess you could say. That's why I say Maito is real. Because during my blackouts, that's who I would turn into. Little did I know what he sounded like, what he looked like. And I think the very first time I laid my eyes on Maito was the music video So Beautiful. I think that was the very first time I blacked out in front of people. I blacked out in front of people a few times. Only some people know about that. Some people that work closely with me, and they had to, because what else are you gonna do? So I had to overstep my boundaries and share it. And mind you, a lot of people don't like sharing this because it is very personal to them. And it might be for the same reasons, such as me, because it's embarrassing, number one. Number two, imagine like you go on a date and you just black out. and you just, I'm not saying this from experience, but and you just wake up and you have, you've skipped like a couple of days, and you've ended up saying like all this weird, crazy shit to a person you've met for the first time. So there is a lot of fear in the unknown. There is a lot of intense moments where you have no control over your blackouts. And for me, especially, I think I've always was scared that I might say something hurtful to the ones I love around me. And I think that's the biggest fear for anyone, especially people that have certain blackouts. Like a lot of people have blackouts. Like if you get drunk, for example, just think of it when you get smashed and you get drunk and then you wake up. That's just a one period moment in your life, but you still are like, man, what the hell happened? And you just have no idea what really took place in those blacked out moments. But let's say you were on autopilot. Let's say you weren't under the influence of alcohol or something. Then people will completely assume that you're aware of your consciousness right at that very moment, but you sound a little different. You talk a little different, and you say a lot of different things. And certainly your knowledge bank is a lot different too. But imagine the conversations you'll have when you come back. So when you come back to yourself, it's a lot of confusion. So that's why I had my team, I think, reportedly just record a lot of these moments and document it, just for my own sanity, right? So, okay, enough of that. I'm just here to really explain to you what this whole law means now.